inheritors of the Nazis. So, without going through the history too much, 1948 we were told that the Arabs were Hitler. 1967 we were told that Nasser of Egypt was Hitler. 1991 we were told Saddam Hussein was Hitler. 2002 again we were told Saddam Hussein was Hitler. Then the past 2 years we're told Hamas is Hitler, Hezbollah is Hitler, Iran is Hitler, Ahmadinejad is Hitler. It's a very interesting phenomenon. On the one hand, we're told that all of Israel's enemies are Hitler incarnate, or the Nazis incarnate. On the other hand, we're told never compare. And if you compare Hitler or the Nazis to anyone else, you're accused of Holocaust denial or Holocaust minimization. The most recent form of this Holocaust industry card is the claim of a new anti-Semitism. Time doesn't allow me to go into it, just a couple of brief remarks quickly. First of all, the two things to say about the new anti-Semitism are, number one, it's not new, and number two, it has nothing at all to do with anti-Semitism. Every time Israel faces a public relations debacle, as it did after the Second Intifada with its brutal attempts to crush the Intifada, or whenever Israel comes under international pressure to resolve the conflict diplomatically, it starts with this extravaganza called the new anti-Semitism. That's again not speculation. It's very easy to prove. Go to your library, type in under the subject heading, new anti-Semitism. 1974, the main Jewish defense organization called the Anti-Defamation League, they put out a book titled The New Anti-Semitism. 1982, the Anti-Defamation League puts out a new book titled The Real Anti-Semitism. Content, there's a new anti-Semitism. And then 2001, 2002, the hysteria started up again about a new anti-Semitism. Is there any evidence for it? This claim of a new anti-Semitism? Everybody here, or at least half the audience, they can tell for themselves. It doesn't require any great powers of research, because the claim was made that the hotbed of this new anti-Semitism in North America is the college campuses. That the college campuses are rife, rampant with this new anti-Semitism. We were told that there were pogroms, riots, being committed against Jews. I must admit, I was a little skeptical. As the person who introduced me noted, I've taught at many universities. For an academic, that's not a badge of honor. Actually, in my case, I've been around the block many times. And as of last year, I think I was around my block for the last time. But I've been on many college campuses. There are a lot of students in the audience, relatively speaking. And one thing you could say about college campuses nowadays, they are so politically correct. You can't be anti-anything. You know, it has its virtues. It also has its problems. It's very stifling and suffocating, I think, in many respects to teach in a college or university nowadays. But everyone knows in a college campus, you obviously can't be anti-black, anti-Puerto Rican, anti-Hispanic, anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-anything, anti-fat, anti-skinny, anti-tall, anti-short. You know, you can't even be anti-downright ugly. You can't. So amidst all of this occasionally stifling and suffocating political correctness, to be told rampant anti-Semitism, riots, pogroms, was self-evidently, I thought, preposterous. I then proceeded to investigate it for a book I wrote couldn't find any evidence. Most of the incidents which are typically cited were simply fabricated. Now you may think, well, that's you, Finkelstein. People find what they're looking for. Fair enough. I'm not going to dispute the human propensity for self-deception and self-delusion. But then you open up the Chronicle of Higher Education, the main in-house magazine of boring academics, and it has an article. It's entitled, quote, "It's a good time to be a Jewish student at an American college." It quotes the head of the Hillel, the main Jewish campus organization, as saying, quote, "It's a golden age of Jewishness on college campuses." It quotes AIPAC, the main Israel lobby in the United States, as saying, "It's a glorious time, not only for Jewish student life on campuses, but for the pro-Israel student movement as well." And anyone who's been on college campuses, of course, knows that. You go to universities now, they have centers, programs, endowed chairs devoted to Judaic studies, Holocaust studies, Israel studies, anti-Semitism studies. The only thing they don't offer yet, and I'm sure it's coming, is a special degree in Jewish naval contemplation. How can you call this anti-Semitism rife on college campuses? It's simply preposterous. Well, what about Europe? They say France, Germany, the UK, they're verging on Hitler 1938, we're told. It's Germany 1938, a new Holocaust. I looked through the literature on the topic. There have been a lot of reports written. Couldn't find any evidence of it, rather the contrary. Again, maybe that's me. So I opened up a book last summer by the leading Zionist historian in the world, a fellow by the name of Walter Laqueur. And Laqueur puts out a book entitled The Changing Face of Anti-Semitism. And what does he find? He says that, referring to Europe, popular attitudes toward Jews were in fact slightly more favorable in 2002 than they had been in 1991. Not only is there no evidence of a new anti-Semitism in Europe, but in fact, the situation and status of Jews in Europe is better now than it ever has been, which is exactly what you would expect for anybody who's familiar with the European scene. The purpose of this new anti-Semitism, it's pretty straightforward, not very complicated. First of all, it turns the perpetrator, namely Israel and its apologists, into the victim. And so we're told to focus on the alleged suffering of Jews today rather than the very real suffering of Palestinians. And the second purpose of this new anti-Semitism, as everyone knows, is to discredit the critics of Israel as being motivated by anti-Semitism. And in fact, we had a very vivid example of that in the past year. So we take the case of Jimmy Carter. He puts out a book entitled Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And Mr. Carter, immediately as the book comes out, for those of you who recall, he first gets accused of being, and now I'm quoting literally, he gets accused of being a plagiarist. He then was accused of being in the pay of Arab sheikhs. He was then accused of being an anti-Semite. He was then accused by Deborah Lipstadt of Emory University. He was accused of being a borderline Holocaust denier. He was then accused by Neil Scher of being a Nazi sympathizer. And then he was accused of being a supporter of Arab terrorism. Now, it was very striking what happened to Jimmy Carter, because it illustrates in a nutshell the whole point of my remarks this evening, and that's where I'm going to leave off. Namely, notice what happened. There was this huge media hysteria surrounding Mr. Carter, and he was called every name in the book. And the whole discussion in the newspapers, go back and read the Washington Post review, read the reviews in the other periodicals. The whole question became, was it true? Is Mr. Carter an anti-Semite? Is he a Holocaust denier? Is he a Nazi sympathizer? Nobody discussed what was in the book. Don't discuss the facts. Wasn't a great book. No, it wasn't a great book. But factually, it was quite accurate when he said the peace will come to the Middle East and the Israel-Palestine when Israel withdraws to its legal borders. That's the uncontested opinion of the world community. The chapter 16, which I would recommend to everyone, it's entitled The Wall as a Prison, perfectly accurate depiction of what Israel is doing in the occupied territories, creating, as it has in Gaza, the largest open-air prison in the world. But we're not supposed to discuss that. Let's talk about everything and anything, but don't discuss the facts. Don't discuss the documentary record. And there are basically two lessons to be learned from that. One, both of them political. Number one, our most powerful weapon is the weapon of truth and the weapon of justice. Those are the weapons that the other side dreads, that it does everything and anything possible to divert our attention from. And we should always bear in mind that fact. Learn the record, know the record. It's our most powerful weapon. The weapons of truth and justice. Basic, elementary, uncontroversial tenets of international law and morality. And the second important lesson, and it's for those of us who often feel weary, despairing, and hopeless, and believe this battle can't be won. Well, the second important lesson is, what happened to Carter? They used every smear, every slander, every vicious ad hominem in the book against him. Nonetheless, to his credit, he stood his ground. He did not back off. He did not retreat. They tried damn hard to get him to retract the title about apartheid. He wouldn't do it. Well, his book was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for about 3 months, or in the top 10. It was #1 for a period. It sold an extraordinary 300,000 copies in hardback. Then Mr. Carter decided he was going to go into the belly of the beast.